Thank you, Zimbabwe, for tuning in to yet another informative edition of your program. This is Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030. This is where we discuss pertinent issues in the agricultural industry of Zimbabwe. We discuss issues surrounding business finance, production economics, time value of money, to mention but a few, so that the Zimbabwean farmer is equipped with the knowledge that he needs to be sustainable and to remain viable and profitable in their agricultural ventures. Today we are here in Harare at the Zimbabwe Farmers Union premises, and I am joined by the Secretary General, Mr. Paul Zakariya, who is going to be enlightening our audience. We are going to be having a discussion anchored or centered on market-led production and market intelligence for the sake of our Zimbabwean farmers here in Zimbabwe, especially aligning it to horticultural production enterprises. Stay tuned. Mr. Zakariya, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
As I have highlighted earlier, today we want to talk of market-led production and market intelligence for the sake of our audience, our Zimbabwean farmers, mostly our horticultural farmers here in Zimbabwe. Can you maybe enlighten our audience there at home, according to market-led production, what does it mean to our Zimbabwean farmer?
Yeah, that's a very important topic that you are touching on, that we need to fuse our production with things that work. And the number one aspect to take into consideration is the markets. So market-led approaches, they do focus on the importance of gathering information, identifying consumers, consumer needs, and then aligning our production to the needs that are there in the market. So there is an issue, a relationship between demand and supply. So you are actually providing what is required by the market. In other words, there is a ready market to convert your product into cash or other valuable commodities. So it is very important that we figure that out much earlier. And also this facilitates that the transformation of the economic and social systems to align production to what is required in the market. Yes. So you see even the infrastructure will begin to speak to that same purpose.
I like that you allude the fact of aligning production to our markets and what is required by the consumers here in Zimbabwe. Now you would find that the gist of market-led production is anchored on maintenance of quality and quantity throughout the various stages of production. How can this work in line with what our farmers are doing to ensure that they remain viable and they are doing their farming enterprises sustainably in the long run?
So you see, it comes all the way from market intelligence, knowing what the market requires, and then prioritizing. Actually, you segment your market. Who is who in the market? Who is consuming what, at what levels, what quality of that product are they consuming? So when you go back to production, this is where now you are saying, informed by the market, these are the specifications of the market, and therefore I must produce according to certain standards. And then it's not only standards, you are now looking also at the volumes that are required.
Yes.
And you are looking at issues to do with consistency. Are you consistent in terms of supplying that market? And are you a reliable producer and supplier of those products? So this is what brings that relationship between production and consumption, where other systems in between begin also to kick in. Okay. So if there is no consistency, for instance, your address is totally lost.
Yes.
In other words, no one will be coming back to you for any contracts or even for any inquiries. Yes. So it is very important that we know the specifications of the market and we produce on our farms according to those specifications, and we are consistent in supplying. And that secures markets for us.
Definitely. You spoke of consistency. One speaker once said, consistency builds legacies.
Exactly.
Moving right along, Mr. Zakariya, in general, what does the Zimbabwean market, especially when it comes to horticultural produce, what does it expect in general? You'd find that I was talking to one farmer one of these days. She was telling me that she was producing her king onion, and when she took it to one supermarket, I'm not going to mention the name, they told her that your bulbs are too big for our market. It was somewhere in Greendale. Our market does not expect such huge bulbs. Maybe if you take them to Mbari or to maybe higher density suburbs. What does the market in Zimbabwe generally, what does it expect to align it to our Zimbabwean farmers, to our farming community?
A very important question as well, and which does not have a very direct answer.
Yes.
Because the tastes are different from one set of community to another, and also different by age, different by race,
Yes.
and many other things. So we need to dive deep into these issues by way of researching and by way of establishing our facts about our markets, and so that when we supply, you see, this is a case, for instance, I'll take the case that you have just presented here, a case where somebody produced knowing that onions are needed anyway.
Yes.
And they produced anyhow and supplied anyhow.
Yes.
So then the product gets to a presumed market, and the market ejects the product. So clearly there was no work that was done to determine what the market actually requires. So these are the specifications that I was talking about.
Yes.
So in production, it is very important for us to go deep into these issues. What does the Indian community require?
Yes.
What does the a family in Mbare require? What does a family in Greendale require? We need to do this research, collect the data sets that will help us now to fashion our production so that we take the product out of the ground at the very, very stage that it is required by the market. So we target. When we are producing for these communities, we target. It is very important. It is sad, actually, to see many farmers stuck with perishable commodities that have no market anywhere. And then you will see later on heaps and heaps of tomatoes or other commodities, perishing, going to waste.
Yes.
It is so sad. It is all because the planning stages were not fulfilled as was required. So every business requires that we put a lot, we invest in planning. You are not losing money when you board a bus to go and check things out somewhere. You are not losing money.
Very true.
Put
You're
that
actually
money,
investing.
Exactly. Put that money in your records. Record that you have spent so much in trying to know what the market requires. It is an investment that has a huge return at the end of the day.
You did touch on a very sensitive issue, Mr. Zakariya, where we were saying that farmers need to take cognizance of principles when it comes to production. For example, you are in Belvedere and you are maybe producing pork products.
Yes.
You are doing polony.
That's it.
You are off the mark.
Correct.
For example, you are in Karoi, you are in our farming areas. I'm not saying it's bad, and there you are producing lettuce.
Correct.
What you are missing the mark.
Exactly.
Who is your intended market? You would find that people there might prefer you having rape, your kovo, maybe your tomatoes. So that is very important for our farming community to invest in research and planning before embarking on any enterprise. Now, viewers, we're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, where we are talking of market-led production and market intelligence for our farming community here in Zimbabwe. Now, viewers, we encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with me, the producer, Wadzanai Manyore. It's on 0772-807-506. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, Agribusiness with Wadzanai. We are also now available on Twitter, and our Twitter handle there is at Agribusiness110. Leave your comments and suggestions on our YouTube channel. They are very welcome and important to us. Our YouTube channel is Agribusiness with Wadzanai. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030. Today, we are here at Zimbabwe Farmers Union premises, and I'm joined by the Secretary General, Mr. Paul Zakariya. He is going to be enlightening us on issues surrounding market-led production and market intelligence, especially for our horticultural farming community. Mr. Zakariya, we are in the second segment. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Earlier on, we were talking of planning and investing in research. I'd like to take away our focus from that a bit and get into market intelligence. What does market intelligence mean?
So these two aspects are quite related,
Okay.
right? In that when we talk about market intelligence now, we are focusing now on what is currently obtaining on the market. That is collecting information about the specifics
Yes.
of the market and the specifics in terms of performance of the market. Now, this is the performance of the market that we are talking about. And in most cases, it relates to the environment that we are operating in. It relates to what is in short supply. It relates to what is oversupplied on the
Yes.
market, so that we navigate the terrain carefully. It makes no sense for anyone to produce tomatoes when you know that there is a glut on the market.
Yes.
There's going to be a glut on the market. So how many have produced this particular crop? And what are the trends like? So you go back into history, you check the trends, you check the prices. Every producer and supplier and business person, for that matter, is interested in what we call the market share.
Yes.
So you want to, increase the share of the market. Your share of the market must always be growing.
Very true.
Or you must maintain it and never lose it. So these are the key things in market intelligence that we are trying to play around with. So it is an art as much as it is a science.
Yes.
So that you understand that you must be on your toes, never be, complacent, because complacence will mean you are, in some cases, you're actually losing out on
Very
the market.
true.
So
Very
the
true.
information that comes, the feedback that comes from the market constitutes the intelligence that you require in order to sharpen your product, in order to sharpen your approach and your engagement with the market.
Yes. Now, Mr. Zakariya, you would find that there is a notion or a misconception or general talk amongst farmers. You would hear them saying, inini as long as vanhu vachidya ndinotoproducer chete. As long as vanhu vaine miromo yekudya, as long as there is someone, people are still eating, I'm going to be producing tomatoes, I'm going to be producing onion. They don't even look at the periods of gluts or shortages. They don't even consider that. I know you spoke about it earlier on, but when it comes to that notion, can you please talk to our Zimbabwean farmers that the ills that come with adopting that, just saying, I have land and vanhu vane miromo, it's like I'm going to be producing tomatoes, that's it.
So this is exactly the reason why we see the sad stories of heaps and heaps of produce perishing and so on. And this is the reason also why we see certain commodities being ejected by the market.
Yes.
It's because we produced believing and sincerely believing that when we produce food, it will be consumed. But we never put in the hours to know who is going to consume my product. Now, here is a very simple illustration. You have a hectare of a piece of land, very productive, good soils, excellent water, and so on. Now, you are going into business, but then you produce a low value commodity purely because it is going to be consumed. You have this notion
Yes.
that someone is just going to eat, but you are wasting that 1 hectare piece of land on a low value commodity because you did not do any research out there. You could have put in a high value, a crop, which then gives you a higher return on that same, small piece of land. So there is need, going back to that issue of planning, there is still need. Having a piece of land, having water does not necessarily mean you should just produce anyhow. We produce for a specific market. And yes, people eat, but we also want to know what they eat, what is in demand, but also what gives me a higher return.
Yes.
So it is about that, balancing that, so that you are not producing what everybody else is producing. And one other big problem for many of our producing communities is people want to produce what they have seen other people producing.
Exactly.
So because they are producing cabbages, Fabiola, everybody is producing Fabiola. And then at the market, you look at trucks and trucks of commodities that are mostly going to waste, that will lose value on the market because of the glut.
As we close this segment, how can our Zimbabwean farmers protect themselves from the uncertainties of what happens at the marketplaces?
A very radical response to that is farmers need now to really understand the art of business.
Yes.
And this is where farmers now need to be more organized than before, not only to produce, but also to go up a little bit and even higher the value chain processes.
Very true.
Farmers need to also be involved in the art of marketing things, controlling the markets themselves. There is no harm in farmers coming together, formalizing their operations, aggregating the produce themselves, and then engaging the buyers directly. We need to see farmers' markets, supply chains that are controlled by farmers.
Very true.
Because this is where the world is going. Farmers should look, their eyes should be on where the dollar is.
Very true.
And this is where farmers now need to say, but let's come together, pool our resources together, aggregate our produce, control the supply chain, even the cold chains for lengthening the shelf life of our produce, so that we target specific markets. And with the volumes that the farmers would have, good quality volumes as well, we can actually negotiate with markets.
On that note, viewers, we're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the third and final segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agriculture on New Directions, Agribusiness. We are here in the third and final segment of your program, where we discuss pertinent issues in the agricultural industry here in Zimbabwe. Today, I am joined by Mr. Paul Zakariya, the Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Farmers Union. Mr. Zakariya, we are in the third and final segment.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Now, you won't find that in our farming community, there has been much talk of tapping into the export markets. Farmers are excited. They are thinking, according to themselves, that the export market is more lucrative. You fetch much, you know what they say, more of your return per dollar invested. Is it true? And what are the prerequisites for a farmer to get into the export market?
The notion that if you export, then you make a lot of money is not necessarily true.
Yes.
And also, accessing those markets, the export markets, is not as easy as 1 + 1.
Very true.
So it's not everyone that can actually just produce and then say, I need to export. There are a lot of things that one needs to consider. The export markets, if we are talking about Europe, and they are different depending on region, they have specific requirements, and specifications for the commodities that they need. The peas, for instance, they will tell you what type of peas, at what stage should it be harvested, how it should be packaged, how it should be cooled. So it's a lot of things already, if you can see that. So from the technical side of production, understanding what that market requires, like we said earlier on, but also understanding the issues of how you cool from the field into a refrigerated truck, possibly going to a pack shed, which also has, required temperatures to keep the peas, under that particular type of temperature. And then after cleaning, packaging, under same conditions, you are now taking your product in a refrigerated vehicle again to the airport or to a vehicle that goes down to Durban. So when people talk about exporting, it is not as easy as ABC.
Okay.
Now, but it is possible. We need to understand the requirements, which will include the global gap requirements. Have you passed? There are also tests and audits that are done at that stage,
yes,
which we should be able to pass. If we are to produce as outgrowers and then have an integrator somewhere who then does all this that we are talking for us, it also means that on our fields there are chemicals that we are not supposed to use and many others. So we need to be compliant, so that you know, the market does not then do a sample out there and then they discover there are, you know, residues of
yes,
or traces of a chemical that is not permissible in that market. So we need to satisfy all that. Coming together again and understanding that this is business, bringing our produce together, going to school about it, be trained, get that knowledge, and then bring your production, you know, in an acceptable manner to where it is supposed to go.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zakariya. But you would find that our Zimbabwean farmers, who are mainly talking about the export markets, they look at export markets as an escape from what is happening in our local markets. Can you touch on that and talk to our farming community in regards to that? Because wamwarukuona kunge kuti zvinhu zvangu zvakuenda kuEurope handasiyana nemamarkets emuZimbabwe handisi kunetswa and stuff. Is it true that we do not have opportunities here in our local markets for our farmers? Can you maybe enlighten us on that?
The export markets are more organized than our local markets, in particular the traditional mass markets.
Yes.
Our traditional mass markets are very complicated when it comes to farmers trying to understand how they just got $1 out of a crate of tomatoes. It's very complex. Whereas, yes, export markets, they have their complexities, but you can trace things from, there is a paper trail. Yes. In terms of your produce has moved from this point to that point. You can trace things. There is that traceability is very clear. But in most cases, our farmers, looking at the Zimbabwean context, our farmers believe that if they export, they will get foreign currency. So they are, yes, chasing the foreign currency.
USD.
The US dollar. That is what our farmers in most cases are chasing.
Yes.
But doing it right, you will get the dollar and you will be satisfied. But if you don't do it right, you will hate exporting for life. So it is very important that we understand also that things do work locally.
Very true.
We can also organize ourselves for the local market and not, you know, trample on each other, you know, just to fight for just one small marketplace or market share. We can actually expand our horizon on the local scene, because we still have people who require excellent quality of products and food commodities in Zimbabwe, but they also have their requirements in terms of standards. So those standards must be met. So there is scope for us to produce for the local market as much as there is scope for us to produce for the export market.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zakariya. I cannot thank you enough on emphasizing on issues surrounding the export market, the prerequisites, what the export market expects from local farmers in Zimbabwe when producing with the intended purpose of exporting to them. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you very much, Wale.
On that note, viewers, we have come to the end of this week's edition, Market-Led Production and Market Intelligence. From me, your host was Zanai Manyore. I'm also on Instagram, it's W Manyore. And the crew behind the scenes, have yourselves a fabulous evening. Thank you for watching.